The daughter-in-law couldn't handle a simple cake again. I had to redo everything. Lydia Peterson's voice echoed through the living room, where about 15 relatives had gathered for her sister's anniversary. These words fell like a bolt from the blue. Tina stood in the doorway with a tray of cups, froze in the room. An awkward silence fell. All the guests, aunts, uncles, cousins, turned their heads towards her. Someone sighed sympathetically. Someone looked away, and her mother-in-law continued, enjoying the audience's attention. I told Max when he got married. Teach her something. 3 years have passed. She still can't fry an omelet properly. It's a good thing I live nearby. Otherwise, my son would go hungry. Tina slowly placed the tray on the coffee table. Every movement was difficult for her, as if she was moving through thick jelly. She looked up and met her husband's gaze. Max sat next to his mother on the sofa, looking out the window. His jaw was tense, but he remained silent, as always silent when his mother began her public performances. The cake his mother-in-law was talking about stood on the festive table, beautiful, 3-tiered, decorated with cream roses. Tina got up at 4 a.m. to bake it. She did everything according to her grandmother's recipe, which had been passed down in their family for generations. The layers were fluffy, the cream tender, the decorations elegant. But an hour before the guests arrived, Lydia Peterson went into the kitchen, tasted the first and 7 cream, and declared it too sweet. The mother-in-law added her own ingredients, redid the roses her way, and now presented the result as her work to save the tax when Hams spoiled dessert. Mom, maybe that's enough. Max finally spoke, but his tone was languid, without real protest. What am I saying? The mother-in-law threw up her hands dramatically. Is it bad that I care about you? I'm helping my daughter-in-law get settled. Not everyone is as lucky as me. At 20, I was already cooking borscht, so my father-in-law licked his fingers. Aunt Betty, the birthday girl's sister, coughed awkwardly and tried to change the subject. Lydia, why don't you tell us about your flowers? They say you grew such beautiful dahlias this year. But the mother-in-law was on a roll. The audience was gathered, the stage was set, and she wasn't going to miss an Ella Brass opportunity to shine. Flowers, bah. It's today's youth that's the problem. They don't know anything, but they're full of ambition. Tina sits in her office all day, comes home, and has no energy for anything. When I was her age, I worked, kept the house in perfect order, and pampered my husband. Right, Jerry? She turned to her husband, who was sitting in an armchair by the window. Jerry Smith, Max's father, just shook his head and went back to reading his newspaper. In 30 years of marriage, he had learned not to interfere with his wife's monologues, and Tina stood in the middle of the room, feeling something slowly dying inside her. This was not the first such scene. In 3 years of marriage, she had endured dozens of such performances. Her mother-in-law humiliated her at every family gathering, every holiday, at every opportunity. She criticized her cooking, her way of dressing, her work, and her upbringing. The mother-in-law did it with a smile, under the guise of care and help, but every word was a small, poisonous sting. At first, Tina tried to justify herself, to prove that she was trying. Then she cried in the bathroom after every visit from relatives. Then she just learned to endure and be silent. But today something changed. Maybe it was the indifferent way her husband looked at her. Maybe it was the pitying way the relatives shook their heads, used to this spectacle. Or maybe the cup of patience just overflowed. Lydia Peterson. Tina's voice sounded unexpectedly loud and clear. Everyone turned to her. Why don't you tell everyone how you called me at work yesterday? The mother-in-law was momentarily confused. She didn't expect her daughter-in-law to speak. Well, I called. So what? I wanted to know if you'd come earlier today to help with the cooking. No. You called me during an important meeting. My secretary said I had an urgent family call. I left the room, thinking something serious had happened. And you asked me what color tights to buy at the store, beige or black. Silence hung in the room. The mother-in-law blushed. So what? I wanted to help. I know you don't have time to go shopping. And then you called 3 more times. Tina continued in the same even tone, to ask what yogurt to buy. Then, whether to use the discount card. Then if I forgot that you had guests today, my boss asked if everything was okay at home. He said if I had family problems, I could take the day off. Tina, that's enough, Max mumbled. Mom means well. Tina turned to her husband. There was so much coldness in her gaze that he stopped, meaning, well, just like when she came to my office. Remember, Max? Your mom came to my workplace with a pot of soup, walked past security, saying she was the mother-in-law, bringing food, because her daughter-in-law eats dry food. She walked into the open space where 30 people were sitting and announced loudly, Tina, I brought you soup, because you can't cook, you're probably just eating sandwiches again. The mother-in-law straightened up on the sofa. Well, isn't it true? Max himself said you often make omelets for dinner. And Max said? Tina slowly turned to her husband. I wonder what else Max told you, Lydia. Peterson? Maybe you should tell everyone. Max turned pale. He knew where she was going. Tina, let's not do this here. Why not here? She looked around at those present. Since mother-in-law loves public discussions, let's discuss everything publicly. Lydia Peterson, tell everyone what Max told you about our salaries, about who earns how much. The mother-in-law hesitated. This topic was delicate even for her. Well, that's personal. Personal? Tina laughed. The laughter was strange and cold. Since when has that stopped you? At Uncle Nick's last birthday, you told everyone that I earn more than Max. Remember how you presented it? My poor son, he has to endure that his wife earns more. Male pride suffers. But he endures it because he loves her. And everyone looked at us with such pity. And Max sat there silently, as always. I was defending my son, the mother-in-law blazed. It's not normal for a wife to earn more. Not normal, you say. Tina took a step forward. And is it normal that your son hasn't worked at all for the last 6 months? Is it normal that he quit his job, didn't tell anyone, and is living off my salary? Is it normal that every day he supposedly goes for interviews, but instead sits at your house playing computer games in his old room? The room became so quiet that the wall clock could be heard ticking. All eyes turned to Max. He sat, staring at the floor, his ears burning red. What nonsense are you talking? The mother-in-law's voice trembled. Max goes to work. Every day. To work? Tina took her phone out of her purse. Do you want me to show you the statement from our joint account? The last deposit from Max was 6 months ago. Or here's his phone's geolocation. Every day. From 10 to 6, he's at your address, Lydia Peterson, while he's supposedly working in an office across town. Max jumped up from the sofa. Were you spying on me? I was worried about you, Tina replied. I thought maybe you were depressed, maybe you needed help. I wanted to talk, too, support you, and then I accidentally saw a message on your phone from your mom, where you wrote how tired you were of pretending to your wife, and she was comforting you, saying that everything would be all right soon. The main thing was not to tell me the truth, that I, quote, already takes too much upon herself. The mother-in-law stood up from the sofa. Her face was crimson. How dare you dig through your husband's phone? That's impolite. Impolite. Tina looked her straight in the eye. And coming to my work with complaints that I don't spend enough time at home. Is that polite? Telling all the relatives about our family affairs? Is that polite? Turning a husband against his wife? Is that polite? Teaching him to lie and conceal? Is that polite? I am a mother, and I have the right to care for my son. You have the right to love him, but you don't have the right to turn him into an infant who, at 33, hides under his mother's skirt instead of solving his problems. Max finally found his voice. Tina, you don't understand. It's temporary. I needed time to think. 6 months. You needed to think. She turned to him. And all this time I was paying for our apartment, buying groceries, paying for your car, and you came home and told me what a hard day you had at work. Remember 2 weeks ago when you complained that you were tired and asked me to cook dinner? Even though it was my turn. What were you tired from, Max? From an 8-hour gaming session? It's all her. Max pointed a finger at Tina, addressing the relatives. She's always nagging me, demanding that I earn more. I couldn't stand the pressure. I nagged. Tina shook her head. I never once reproached you about your salary, never once compared you to others. It was your mother who reminded you every time that your friend's son was already a director, and you're still a mid-level manager. I wanted him to strive for the best, the mother-in-law shouted. No, you wanted him to be better than others, so you could brag about him to your friends. And when he didn't meet your expectations, you decided that everything was my fault. The daughter-in-law who doesn't support him, doesn't inspire him, doesn't create conditions. Tina walked to the festive table and took the cake knife. Everyone tensed, but she simply cut a piece and put it on a plate. And you know what? This cake really is too sweet. Lydia Peterson is right. As in everything else, probably. I'm a bad homemaker, a bad wife, a bad daughter-in-law. I work too much. I cook paint. I don't know how to create coziness. She took a bite of the cake and slowly chewed it. But you know what I'm good at? I'm good at earning money. I'm good at supporting a family. I'm good at paying bills, and I'm good at respecting myself. And that turns out to be the most important thing. She put the plate on the table and turned to Max. I'll pack your things in the hallway. You can pick them up tomorrow, or your mom can come. She likes to take care of everything. You can't kick me out. Max was in shock. This is our apartment. This is my apartment, Tina corrected. Registered to me, bought with my money before marriage. You just lived in it for free, by the way. The mother-in-law rushed to her. How dare you? You're destroying the family. I'm leaving, Tina said calmly. From your son. From you. From this theater of the absurd, where I played the role of the bad daughter-in-law for 3 years. No, a mother-in-law is not a sentence, but a mother-in-law like you is a disaster. You raised a son who can't live without his mom. Now live with him. Yourself. She picked up her purse and headed for the exit. At the door, she turned around. Aunt Betty, happy birthday. Sorry for the docker. Scene. The rest of you, it was informative to learn that for 3 years you knew what a bad homemaker I was, and remained silent. Thank you for the lesson, Tina. Left the apartment, quietly closing the door behind her. A deadly silence fell in the living room. The mother-in-law stood in the middle of the room with her mouth open, unable to believe what was happening. Max sat on the sofa, his head in his hands. The relatives exchanged glances. Not knowing what to say, Max's father was the first to break the silence. He folded his newspaper, stood up from his armchair, and looked at his wife and son. You played your game, he said. I warned you. Lydia, I said. Don't meddle in their lives, but you know best. Now enjoy the result. Max is moving in with us. Get his room ready. Looks like he'll be there for a long time. Meanwhile, Tina was walking down the stairs. With each step, she felt lighter. For 3 years, she had carried the burden of other people's expectations, claims, accusations. For 3 years, she had tried to prove that she was worthy of being a wife, a daughter-in-law, part of a family. But only now did she understand a simple truth. Not every family is worth striving for. Tina stepped outside. The evening air was cool and fresh. She took a deep breath and smiled. For the first time in a long time, she felt free. Free. From a toxic mother-in-law, from a weak husband, from the need to constantly justify living the way she wanted. Her phone vibrated in her purse. 10 messages from Max. Calls from her mother-in-law. Tina silenced it and put it back. None of it mattered anymore. The old life was left behind the door of that apartment, and ahead was a new one. Her own, without humiliation or manipulation. Passing a bakery. She stopped. In the window was a chocolate cake, with the inscription for special moments. Tina went inside and bought it. Today was indeed a special moment. At home, she brewed tea, cut a large piece of cake, and sat by the window. Outside, the lights of the evening city were coming on. Somewhere out there, her mother-in-law was surely telling relatives what a terrible daughter-in-law she had. Max was probably complaining to his friends about his tyrannical wife, and she sat in the silence of her apartment, enjoying the taste of freedom. And that taste was sweeter than any cake.